The lawyer's hand stopped mid-reach for his briefcase. He looked at the mediator, then back at me, and didn't say a word. I remember thinking, this is the moment everything changes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it actually started, to a Tuesday in November, in a town so small that everybody knows what you had for breakfast before you've even finished eating it. I grew up in Spruce Hollow, about 2 hours northeast of Thunder Bay, Ontario. If you've never heard of it, that's fine, most people haven't. It's the kind of place where the Tim Hortons on Main Street doubles as a community center, where hockey schedules get posted on the church bulletin board, and where your family name follows you like a second shadow everywhere you go. My name is Claire Beaumont Walsh. The Beaumont side comes from my mother's family old French-Canadian roots, proud and loud about it. The Walsh side is my father's quieter, steadier, the kind of people who don't say much but mean everything they do say, or so I thought. I was the middle child. My older brother Daniel was the one my parents talked about at dinner. He'd gone into the family contracting business straight out of high school, learned the trade from my father, and by 26 he was running crews across 3 counties. My younger sister, Megan, was still in school when everything happened. She was finishing her nursing degree at Lakehead. She was the baby. She got the soft version of my parents' attention. And then there was me. I'd always been the one they didn't quite know what to do with. Not rebellious, not troubled, just different. I read too much. I asked too many questions. I got a scholarship to study law at the University of Ottawa, and left Spruce Hollow at 18 without looking back, which my mother took personally and never fully forgave. "You think you're better than us," she told me the Christmas I came home in second year. She didn't say it angry. She said it the way she said most things, matter of fact, like she was simply naming a color. "That's not what I think," I said. She'd turned back to the stove. That was the end of it. After I graduated, I articled in Ottawa for 2 years, then took a position with a federal regulatory body. I can't say more than that about the specifics of my work. Confidentiality is part of the job, but what I can tell you is that the work mattered, and it took me places, and it meant that I wasn't always reachable. I missed weddings. I missed birthdays. I missed the slow accumulation of family moments that everybody else seems to collect without trying. My mother kept a running tally of every absence, I'm sure of it. She had the kind of memory that stored grievances the way a root cellar stores vegetables, cool, dark, perfectly preserved. I called when I could. I sent cards. I came home twice a year, Christmas and one summer weekend, usually in July when my workload dipped slightly. It wasn't enough for her. I understood that, even if I couldn't change it. My father was harder to read. He'd nod when I walked in the door. He'd ask about my drive. He'd pass the potatoes at dinner. But there was always something withheld, some warmth that stopped just short of reaching me. I used to wonder if he was proud of me and just didn't know how to say it, or if he genuinely didn't feel it at all. I got my answer eventually, just not the way I expected. My grandmother, my father's mother, Nana Walsh, passed away in February, 3 years ago. She was 81. She had a small house on the edge of town, a blue-gray bungalow with a covered porch and a silver birch tree in the front yard that she'd planted the year my father was born. She called it her birthday tree. She used to sit on that porch every single evening with a cup of tea, no matter the season, watching the light change through the birch branches. I loved that woman completely. She'd been the one person in my family who'd never made me feel like my life was a commentary on theirs. When I called to tell her I'd passed the bar, she'd cried. Actually cried. "I always knew you would," she'd said. "You were always the one who kept going when the rest of us would have stopped." I don't think she meant anything critical by it. That was just how she saw things. When she died, I drove through the night from Ottawa. 14 hours. I didn't sleep before the service. I stood at the back of street, and listened to the priest say the words, and I didn't cry until I saw my father's shoulders shake in the front pew, and then I couldn't stop. What I didn't know, what none of us knew until the reading of the will, was that Nana Walsh had left her house to me. Not to my father, not to Daniel, not split between the grandchildren. To me, specifically, with a letter attached that her lawyer read aloud afterward in the church hall, while we were still in our funeral clothes, still holding foam cups of weak coffee. The letter said she'd watched me work harder than anyone in the family to build something, and that she wanted me to have a place to come back to. A place that was mine. She said she hoped I'd keep the porch and the birch tree. The room went very quiet when the lawyer finished reading. My mother set her coffee cup down on the folding table with a precise little click. The months that followed were the worst of my adult life. My father wouldn't speak to me directly. He'd relay messages through Daniel. "Dad wants to know if you've talked to a realtor." When I said the house wasn't going up for sale, the messages stopped. My mother called me 3 times in the first week. Not to talk, to argue. She said Nana Walsh hadn't been in her right mind toward the end, which wasn't true. She'd been sharp as January ice until the last month. She said it wasn't fair to my father, who'd done repairs on that house for years and never charged a cent. She said I'd manipulated an old woman by being the absent grandchild who swooped in and made herself seem special. I didn't ask for it, I told her. She chose to do this. "You were always selfish," my mother said. "You left and you never looked back, and now you want to take the last thing your father had from her." I started to respond and she hung up. Daniel sent a longer message, more measured. He said he understood that I was legally entitled to the house, but that as a family matter it seemed right to consider what the fair division should be. He used phrases like going forward and family harmony and reasonable people. I recognized the tone. It was the same tone he used when he was negotiating a contract. Megan didn't say anything for weeks. When she finally texted, it was just, "This is so hard. I love you. I don't know what to do." I texted back that I loved her too, and that she didn't have to do anything. I hired a property lawyer in Thunder Bay. Not because I was planning to fight, I just needed to understand my position clearly. The will was straightforward, the lawyer told me. There was no legal ambiguity. The house was mine. But my family wasn't interested in legal clarity. They wanted a different outcome. 6 months after the funeral, they filed a formal challenge to the will. I found out through my lawyer, who called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was in a meeting I couldn't leave. I stepped into the hallway and she gave me the short version. My father and Daniel had retained a firm out of Thunder Bay and were contesting on the grounds of undue influence. The claim was that I had manipulated my grandmother during her final years into changing her will in my favor. I stood in that hallway for a long moment after I hung up. The fluorescent light above me flickered twice. I thought about Nana Walsh on her porch. I thought about the birch tree. I thought about the fact that the last time I'd visited her, 8 months before she died, I hadn't even known she was planning to leave me anything. We'd spent the whole weekend fixing a leak under her kitchen sink and watching old CBC nature documentaries and eating the date squares she made every time I came home. I went back into my meeting. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. The mediation was set for a Thursday in April at a firm in Thunder Bay. Neutral ground, the process coordinator had called it. I drove up the night before and stayed in a hotel downtown near the waterfront. I ordered room service and tried to sleep and mostly didn't. In the morning, I put on the dark gray blazer I wear when I want to feel settled. I drove to the address. I parked. I sat in the car for a few minutes and looked at the building. Before I went in, I called Megan. She was the only one in the family I'd been able to talk to through all of this carefully, around the edges of things, but still. "You okay?" she said. "I don't know," I said. "I think so. They're not bad people, Claire." "I know they're not. They don't know how to lose things gracefully." "No," I said. "Neither do I." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry I'm not there." "It's okay. It's better this way." The mediation room had a long oval table, gray carpet, and a window overlooking a parking structure. There were bottles of water set out and a box of tissues. I noticed the tissues. I decided I wouldn't use them. My father and Daniel were already seated on one side when I came in, with their lawyer, a man named Garrett, mid-50s, expensive watch, the practiced ease of someone who does this every week. My lawyer sat beside me. The mediator was a woman named Dr. Okafor. She had close-cropped hair and a very calm way of holding the room. She introduced herself, explained the process, and asked if everyone was ready to proceed. My father looked at his lawyer rather than at me. My mother wasn't there. I'd half expected her to be. Garrett opened by outlining the family's position. He was smooth about it. He talked about my grandmother's age and declining health in her final years. He talked about the irregularity of my contact with the family, long absences, missed occasions. He implied that my presence during certain visits had been strategic, designed to cultivate a relationship with a vulnerable elder that my own father hadn't been able to maintain at the same intensity because he was, as Garrett put it, busy with the practical realities of caring for his business and his community. Then he turned to me directly, which I hadn't quite expected. "Miss Beaumont Walsh," he said, "can you tell us in your own words why you believe your grandmother singled you out above her own son?" My lawyer put a hand on the table, a signal that I could defer. I didn't. Because she knew me, I said. Not a version of me that fit neatly into the family, the actual me, and I think she wanted me to have somewhere to belong. Garrett nodded slowly, in the way that lawyers nod when they're not agreeing with you. Your work, he said, picking up a document, seems to involve a significant amount of travel and absence. Confidential federal work, is that right? Would it be fair to say that this property would not be a primary residence in any practical sense? It would be a home, I said. That's not the same as primary residence. Daniel shifted in his chair. He'd been looking at the table for most of this, and something about the way his jaw moved told me he wasn't entirely comfortable with the direction this was going. But he didn't say anything. Then my father spoke. It was the first time he'd said a word since I'd walked in. He hadn't looked at me directly yet, but now he did. You were never around, he said. It wasn't angry, it was flat. You left this family and you built your life, and that's fine, that's your right. But to take the one thing, the one piece of what remains of my mother, that's not something I can let go of easily. The room was very still. Dad, I said. She loved you, he said. I know she loved you. But she loved all of us. And I don't understand why. He stopped. He pressed his lips together. Dr. Okafor let the silence hold for a moment before she spoke. Mr. Walsh, she said gently. Perhaps this would be a natural point to take a short break. In the hallway, my lawyer touched my arm. You're doing fine, she said quietly. He really doesn't know, I said. She looked at me. Know what? I'd never told her. I'd never told anyone outside of the people who needed to know, because that was the nature of the work. But standing in that hallway, I thought of Nana Walsh saying you were always the one who kept going, and I made a decision. There's something I need you to know, I told my lawyer. Before we go back in, when the session resumed, Dr. Okafor asked if there was anything either party wanted to add before she summarized the positions on the table. My lawyer said yes. She passed a folder to Dr. Okafor, and at the mediator's nod, one to Garrett as well. Garrett opened the folder. He read the first page. Then he stopped. He read it again. Dr. Okafor reviewed hers, and then she looked up at me with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of someone recalibrating something they thought they'd understood. Miss Beaumont Walsh, she said carefully, this changes the context of the discussion considerably. Garrett set the folder down. He looked at my father, then at Daniel, then back at the folder. He cleared his throat. He paused. I wasn't aware of this. My father looked between the two of them. What is it? What does it say? It was my lawyer who answered, evenly and without drama. She explained that the work I'd been doing for the past 4 years was classified federal work, cross-jurisdictional regulatory oversight that involved extended periods of absence, restricted communication, and the kind of operational parameters that made it genuinely impossible to explain my whereabouts to family members. She said that my apparent absences, my unavailability, my failure to account for my time, all of it had a reason. She said I'd received a commendation from the department 2 years prior that she wasn't permitted to name. For work she wasn't permitted to detail. She said that Nana Walsh had known. Not the specifics, but enough. I'd told her enough, because I'd trusted her with it the way I hadn't trusted anyone else. The folder contained a letter of verification from my supervising director. It had taken 2 days and several phone calls to get clearance to use it. I'd almost decided not to. But I thought of my father saying you were never around with that flat, wounded certainty, and I thought, he deserves to know why. Daniel put his hands flat on the table. He wasn't looking at the folder. He was looking at me. Claire, he said. My name. Not Miss Beaumont Walsh. Just Claire. I know, I said. My father hadn't moved. He was still looking at the folder in Garrett's hands, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something he could process more easily. Garrett leaned over and said something quietly to my father that I couldn't hear. My father closed his eyes. Dr. Okafor called a second recess, longer this time. I went to the washroom down the hall and ran cold water over my wrists. I looked at myself in the mirror for a while. I didn't look like someone who had just won something, because I hadn't. There was no version of that room where anyone came out ahead. When I came back, Garrett was standing in the hallway with his briefcase. He nodded at me, a different kind of nod than the ones he'd been giving me all morning. More honest. I need to speak with my clients privately, he said. This may take some time. That's fine, I said. I went back to the mediation room and sat across from Doctor. Okafor and my own lawyer, and drank a full glass of water. Dr. Okafor asked me a few careful questions, not about the case, just about me, how I was doing. I told her I was okay. She nodded like she didn't quite believe me, and wasn't going to push it. 40 minutes later, Garrett returned with my father and Daniel. My father sat down. He looked older than he had that morning. He put both hands on the table in front of him and he looked at me. "I have some things to say," he said. "And I want you to let me finish." I said I would. He told me that he'd spent years believing a story about me that he'd written himself. He said he'd told himself I'd left because I thought I was too good for Spruce Hollow, too good for the life my family had built, and that every year I didn't come back was confirmation of it. He said my mother had felt the same, more so. Maybe, because she'd taken my leaving as a personal rejection rather than just a professional choice. He said he'd been wrong. He said he hadn't known what I was doing, but even setting that aside, even if the job had just been a regular government desk job in Ottawa, he'd had no right to decide that his grief over my absence was more important than my freedom to build my own life. His voice broke once, briefly, and then he steadied it. He said Nana Walsh had always understood me better than he had, and that instead of asking her why, or asking me why, he'd just let the resentment grow until it had taken him here, to a mediation room in Thunder Bay, trying to take something from his own daughter. "I'm not proud of this," he said. I didn't say anything for a moment. The light through the window had shifted, the morning cloud had broken, and there was real sunlight coming in now, hitting the side of the water bottle in front of me. "I know you're not," I said finally. "And I know it wasn't just about the house." He nodded. "I should have told you more," I said. "I should have found a way to let you know that the absence wasn't indifference. I convinced myself you wouldn't understand, and maybe that was easier for me than trying." Daniel made a sound that was almost a laugh. "We're terrible at this," he said. "We really are," I said. The challenge was withdrawn that afternoon. The paperwork took less than an hour to process. Garrett had the grace to shake my hand on the way out and not say anything unnecessary. My father and I walked to our cars together. The parking lot was salted and patchy with the last of the April snow. The birch trees along the back fence were just starting to show green at their tips. He stopped at his truck and turned to face me. The wind off Lake Superior was cold and direct and real. "I'd like to come see the house," he said. "Sometime, if that's all right." "It's all right," I said. "I'd like to fix that gutter on the north side," he said. "I noticed it was pulling away from the fascia last fall." "I noticed that too," I said. He nodded. He looked at the birch trees along the fence for a moment. "She was proud of you," he said. "She told me once I didn't understand it at the time. She said that one carries more than she lets on, and she carries it without complaining. I thought she was just..." He stopped. "I don't know what I thought she was doing, but she was right." I didn't answer right away. The wind moved through the birch trees. "I'm going to keep the porch," I said. He looked at me. "She asked me to," I said. "In the letter. She asked me to keep the porch and the birch tree." He pressed his lips together the same way he had in the mediation room, and this time his eyes went bright. "Good," he said. "That's good." I drove back to Spruce Hollow that same evening rather than staying over in Thunder Bay like I'd planned. I don't know exactly why, some pull I couldn't name. I stopped at the Tim Hortons on Main Street out of habit and got a medium dark roast, and the woman at the counter said, "You're Margaret Walsh's granddaughter, aren't you?" And I said yes. "She was a wonderful woman," she said. "She was," I said. I drove to the blue-gray bungalow on the edge of town. I didn't go inside. I sat on the porch in my coat with my coffee and I looked at the birch tree, which was bare still but full of the particular silver patience of things that have been through many winters and are not afraid of another one. I thought about what my father had said. "She carries it without complaining." I thought about all the things we don't say to each other, all the stories we build about the people closest to us out of assumptions and silences and old hurt, and how those stories harden over years until we forget we wrote them ourselves. I finished my coffee. The sky had gone that deep northern blue it gets after sunset in April, not dark yet, not light anymore, just wide and clear and honest. I stayed until the stars came out. 2 weeks later, my father and Daniel drove up on a Saturday with ladders and a truck bed full of new fascia board, and my mother came too, quieter than usual, with a casserole dish wrapped in a tea towel. She handed it to me at the door without fanfare. "It's turdier," she said. "It'll keep." "Thank you," I said. She looked past me into the front hall, at the coat hooks and the old rag rug, and the framed photo of Nana Walsh at 30 that had always hung by the door. "She looked like you," my mother said. "I never noticed that before." I looked at the photo. "I think I looked like her," I said. My mother was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I suppose that's right." She went past me into the kitchen to put the casserole in the fridge, and outside I could hear my father's boots on the ladder, steady and deliberate, and the small, solid sound of him beginning to fix something. I stood in the hallway for a moment between the two of them, my mother in the kitchen, and my father on the ladder, and I thought, this is what it looks like. Not repaired, not the way a break is repaired, more like a tree that's been split by lightning, and grows back differently changed in its shape but still reaching. I didn't leave because I thought I was better. I didn't stay away because I didn't care. I went where the work was, and the work mattered, and I carried it the way she said without complaining, without asking them to understand what I couldn't explain. But I should have tried harder. And so should they. And here we were, all of us, finally in the same place. The screen door creaked behind me as I stepped out to help with the ladder.